Hello, everyone. This is live broadcast number 11. At least I'm in double digits, but still, I'm still very raw. I'm still figuring out all the tools and everything. I want to talk about what to do when your requests are ignored. And here, it has to be clear that I'm not talking about requests you make with your family members, your spouse, or your children, or your parents, and those kinds of things. These are high stakes requests. That means by getting those requests fulfilled, there is either a big upside for you, or if you don't get those requests fulfilled, there's a big downside for you. Those are called high stakes requests. What happens when it is fulfilled? Something positive. What happens if they don't get fulfilled? Something negative. But other requests are simple casual ones, and I know we all know how to deal with them, right? So basically, first, what I want to talk about what not to do, right? It's not a numbers game. That means when a request is not fulfilled, you should not say, okay, I'll make 10 other requests and it'll happen. It's not an email campaign management. When the high stakes requests are there, it's personal and it has to be treated personally. And there is very difficult to scale these high stakes requests. It's not the nature of the request is such that you have to make requests only to a few people because not everybody can fulfill them, right? So, and the second thing not to do is as soon as you get a rejection from someone for a high stakes request, you should not say, okay, let me just explain to them why they should do it. The fact that it's a request means they have an option to fulfill it or an option to ignore it or option to reject it. So we have to be willing to accept that those three options are there. It's a multiple choice question where you can say, where you are asking them, fulfill, reject, ignore, or postpone, or something like that. So any of the choices they can take, and you should be able to accept it because it's a request. It's not an order. So that means we go to the reflection time. Like, what do we do? How do we think about? You made a high stakes request. It got ignored. How do you even think about it? Because this is important. So just like in a system, engineering system, if something goes broke, we start looking at what are the elements of the system. The key elements in the case of a request are only three: you, the request, and the recipient. Right? There is nothing else. Of course, there are so many nuances. I'm just trying to make it simple to for the sake of this analysis. Think about it. Something has to change in the request in one of these elements. If you think the recipient has to change, then either it's a wishful thinking or or it's like you want to force it in the system, like you would say, no, they have to accept my request and they have to fulfill it. That's not going to happen, right? Because you have zero control on the recipient in these cases. Yes, that's the least leverageable thing, right? You just say, I hope they just change and accept the request or fulfill the request. Second is request, and it is good because sometimes you make a request and they don't know what it is because you said it so poorly or not formed it very well that they ignored it because it's confusing. So I hope that's not the case in all of us. But in any case, if that is the case, that's the easy part to fix it. But the last thing and the most important thing is you. Basically, you have to, if you are an opportunity cost instead of an opportunity for the recipient, then there is a high degree that they're going to ignore it, right? Because your request and you are ignorable. It's really hard to accept it, but that is the truth. Like in my early days, I used to be rejected more often, right? So basically, as I reflected more, I started making less and less requests. And my teacher in linguistic philosophy class, Toby Hecht, taught us one thing, and I still remember it. Your power, when I say power, it's not the power of the money and all those things. It's power is the capacity to get things done. If your power is high enough and you make a request, not fulfilling your request should create a competitive disadvantage for them. That means ignoring your request should be so expensive that they would not dare to do it. And for that, you have to be so thoughtful that the request has to be easy for them, valuable for you. That's the matrix you have to think. Easy for them, valuable for you, right? So, but if there is nothing to feel bad about, because there was a case that was, one day, about few years ago, a request was ignored for an introduction for me. And if I thought about, I could have thought about many things, right? So I could have thought, how could they do it? They should not do it. This is wrong. But because I had good teachers, they said, at this point in time, for that person, you are an opportunity cost. Your job is to not worry about them. Your job is to worry about you, because have you have the most control on you. You don't have the most control on them. So what should you do? So yeah, my teacher asked me. I said, "What do you think I should do?" He said, "You should grow so fast and so powerful that one day, if ever the paths cross, the situation changes, and they should not ignore your request, even if you want them to." So that happened to me about 10 years later. So that taught me a lesson that it's always we are the only people who we can control. The request, of course, it has to be formed right. But more than anything, if you keep growing, the number of people who will reject you or ignore your request will become less and less and less. I'll give an example. So, ignore request for an introduction. You ask, let's say, John to introduce you to Bob. So, what are the things that you should take care so that before you ask for an introduction, what all should happen? So, there are three key elements here. So, one is the trust. What do you mean by trust? First, Bob should have enough trust about you. Forget about as a person, as a professional, he should trust you, right? So, and it has several more levels, because the introduction is always in the context. So he should also know, for that context, you have the necessary skills and capabilities. When it is fulfilled, you can actually take advantage of it. It's the second level of trust. Third is the project or the opportunity for which you are asking for an introduction. Ultimately, John should feel that if he introduces you to Bob, he will look good in front of Bob. The Bob will be happy that you brought you and the opportunity to his attention. It should almost be so good that Bob should thank John for introducing you to him. If it is not there, that level of trust is not there, it's easy to be ignored. Then what next? The second is the timing. So even if all the elements are right, but Bob is so busy that he has no time to even look at it. If the timing is wrong, everything is wrong, right? So something to always think about, that see, for just like everybody has only 24 hours in a day, even if it is the best thing to happen, if the timing at this point in time is wrong, it's wrong. So there is nothing to feel bad about this. So the better thing is to ask John to check with Bob whether this is the right timing. If the timing is wrong, you should not even request John to make the introduction. That's why I read long ago that one of the venture capitalists, Fred Wilson, he uses a term called double opt-in introductions. That means don't make introductions before you get okay from both the parties who are being introduced. And double opt-in is a little bit geeky word. That's basically get permission from both parties before you make the introduction, so that the introduction does not just go waste, right? So that's something to think about. The next one is the third element is the thoughtfulness. The introduction is structured right. That means if you thought about it, it's not just in the narrative, but in the design of the introduction itself. That if it is run really, really right, you can make it such a way that it's an opportunity for Bob and not a, a work order, or just not something that Bob has to do, but Bob has to welcome with the red carpet welcome, that this is a great introduction. So as you can see, the requests are ignored for many, many reasons, but The elements that are under your control for any such thing to be fixed is you and the request and all the things that are around them. It's never the recipient. So there is nothing to feel bad about whether they're judging you and whether they're judging the project. Just to give you peace of mind, they are. So yeah, I can say nobody should judge anybody. They are, because they have to evaluate the request among all the other things that are going on in their life, whether this will be enough, big enough priority for them to display something that's already there. Because the higher the person in the power scale, the higher the request for their time, energy, money, and attention. So it will always have to rise up in their pecking order to make accommodation for your request. Something has to be displaced, because it's not like they're just twiddling their thumbs and waiting for, who will request me something? I'm just super free now. So I'm just waiting for somebody to ask me something. Nothing like that is happening. They're all busy, filled to the brim. So you have to be lucky to get into into their list of priorities that's already going there. So the more you are thoughtful, more you are trustworthy, and more you get the timing right, the request will be fulfilled. This whole thing, I can talk for 1 or 2 days. But I want to give the sneak preview now, and then at some point in time, I'll do a bigger talk or something for those who are interested. But right now, I just wanted to share this and have a happy day. And until next time, so you have a fantastic week ahead.